All right, parents, here we go again. It's the Ask Dr. Tony episode. This is the Experience Miracles podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, an expert in pediatrics, neurodevelopmental disorders, and drug-free, nervous system-focused healthcare. On this weekly episode, I'll be addressing the top questions on every parent's mind. If there's one thing we love and welcome, it's parents who never stop learning, asking the hard questions, and advocating for your kiddos like none other. So get ready for some real talk, real-life clinical and parenting experience, and real easy to understand answers that will help your family take action and get to that next level of health and healing. You ask, I answer. Let's dive into today's episode. Every parent out there has felt that embarrassing, frustrating, sometimes pretty maddening feeling when your kiddo is having a meltdown, when they're having a tantrum, when they're misbehaving. Obviously, it gets a million times worse how we feel about it when it's happening in public, at Target, at school, in a restaurant, wherever it may be. But most of the time, we know exactly why it's happening. We didn't get a lot of sleep last night. It's been crazy busy. We haven't ate healthy. We sent them to grandpa and grandma's and they loaded them up on sugar. We tend to know exactly what it is that causes our kiddos to be exhausted, to be overstressed, to be out of balance, and why they would maybe have these tantrums or these behavior issues. But what if they're happening all the time? What if they're happening virtually every single day or multiple times per day? At school, at the store, in restaurants, you name it, it's happening. And you know that despite what the pediatrician or others may tell you, oh, they're just a toddler, they're just a kiddo, they'll grow out of it, these are just things they got to go through, you know deep down something more is going on. If that's you, we're going to tap into and explain exactly, scientifically, what it is that's going on when you're struggling to overcome constant tantrums, meltdowns, and behavior issues with your kiddo. And we'll give you drug-free, helpful action steps to get to the root cause of this issue instead of just hoping they'll get better and they'll grow out of it. This is a bigger issue than most of us think about because, in fact, according to Johns Hopkins and other research, 1 in 5 children have a diagnosis where they struggle mentally, emotionally, behaviorally. That's a staggering number, and it doesn't even account for many families struggling who haven't gone in and got a formal diagnosis. But here's the thing. What if we told you that these challenging behaviors often stem from an imbalance in your child's nervous system, which is not a place traditional doctors are going to look? And what if there was a way to address these issues without relying on medication or behavioral modification therapies? Today, we're going to explore this groundbreaking approach that honestly could transform your family's life and get through all this frustration and exhaustion and embarrassment. We're going to dive deep into the neuroscience behind these behavior issues and how neurologically focused chiropractic care can help restore balance to your child's nervous system. You're going to learn about the real root causes of these behaviors and discover a drug-free approach to help your child regulate their emotions and behavior way more effectively. That was the story. That is the story for our little buddy Jake. Let me tell you about this sweet little dude. His mom explains that when Jake was just 2.5 years old, he went from a sweet, smiling little boy to acting out, experiencing tantrums, crying spells, explosive, angry reactions, and when triggered, his anger would escalate quickly. He would yell, he would stomp, he would call himself stupid, and at times even hit himself. And several years later, it had directly impacted his self-esteem. With every reaction, angry outburst, and tense moment, the family grew more and more desperate. They began to feel that weight of heaviness across their whole home. And Jake's family had numerous conversations with their pediatrician, weekly sessions with the child therapist, meetings with school teachers, social workers, 504s. They just wanted peace for Jake. And after an extremely explosive event at a martial arts competition, they knew they needed to take a completely different approach to help him. They had heard about PX Docs and neurologically focused chiropractic from a friend, so they decided to give it a chance and got started right away. With consistency and time that helped rewire and re-regulate Jake's nervous system, they began to see big changes. After 3 to 4 months, Mom told us that Jake appeared calmer. They noticed him to begin to use his words to express how he felt. He was less anxious, less combative, and way less intense. He began to smile and started to playfully joke around with his family. Jake still has his moments of frustration, but he's learned to recognize when he has this heightened, excessive stress and apply strategies he has learned in therapy to calm down because his nervous system is now communicating with the rest of his body. He's happier, he smiles a lot, he jokes around, he's playful, he articulates his needs and advocates for himself through words and not reactions and emotions. And the biggest accomplishment to date that is this comeback and has really told the story for Jake is where he has gone in competitive karate. Last July, he competed in the AAU National Karate Tournament and took home 2 gold medals in kata and kumite. I don't even know if I'm saying those right, in his age division, a national champion in 2 events. We could not be more proud of Jake. Now, Jake's story, the reason I wanted to go through all the details and articulate that story is because did you notice what we see all the time occurred in Jake's story too? They'd already tried everything. They were doing weekly counseling. They had taught him, as parents, incredible parents and incredible counselors and incredible teachers and support network at school, they were trying to teach him these skills, these emotional behavioral regulation skills. See, when you break down behavioral modification, as parents, we all try our own kind of inborn version of it. We try either rewards or punishments or a mix of both. But when you get professionals involved, there's different things like, is this a learned behavioral? Is this a skill they haven't learned yet? What do we need to do? So they address the problem awesomely. They do some investigation. They do some interpretation of the situation. And they say, okay, we got to take this approach and then we got to take that approach. And what we talk to and what we get from parents all the time is no matter what approach they take, it's not working. Whether it's their own, we'll call it old school, new school, the list goes on. We had a family one time say we tried all of these therapies, all these rewards, all this therapy and support for our daughter to behave and focus and make it through the school day without her tantrums, without her emotions, without her anger. But it only led to more frustration and more challenges with her self-esteem because it felt like we were asking her to climb Mount Everest with a broken leg. I'll never forget that analogy because that's how it can feel when you're trying to overcome these tantrums, these meltdowns, and these behavior issues. And no matter how many different strategies, either at home, crafted on your own, or with school and with professional support strategies you try, the anger issues, the frustration issues persist. And I just got to say it one more time because I think it's the biggest deal with this conversation. Now that breeds and leads to self-esteem and lowered confidence. So now we're going to go from anger and anxiety and outbursts often to exhaustion and depression and emotional dysregulation in a bigger way and at a bigger scale as kids get older and face bigger challenges socially, emotionally. So this thing right here is its own perfect storm. Let's break down the science really quick and get you into those drug-free action steps and explain a little more of how exactly this neurologically focused chiropractic care worked for Jake and so many kids just like him. Okay, very first, most important difference between our approach as neurologically focused chiropractors and every other approach. Instead of trying to change things on the outside and modify behavior by modifying the external environment and situation, which you can't always control, we actually work to change the internal environment, specifically what's called the central and autonomic nervous system. See, the nervous system on the inside controls everything on the inside and controls how we react and adapt to the outside. So kiddos who have an overstressed, wound up, dysregulated nervous system, they're already stressed. They're already wound up on the inside. So it only takes the tiniest little trigger, the tiniest little off-kilterness on the outside in their environment to trigger that response, to trigger that tantrum, to trigger that anger. So this is why families get so frustrated. They move all of these mountains metaphorically to try and make the outside just right at school, at home, and when they go out in public, and they work their tails off to try and perfectly curate this environment, which is an impossible task. And even the littlest hiccup in that, the littlest change in schedule, the littlest bright noise, or kid did this, or the list goes on, and their child goes 0 to 100 with their nervous system stress in a hot second and has that tantrum. There's something that triggers that stress that is actually under the hood neurologically, if you will, in their internal environment, and it's called subluxation or sympathetic dominance. We've talked about it a couple of times, but this fight or flight response being stuck on, which is what subluxation and sympathetic dominance means, then adds up and stacks up to an entirely out of balance, dysregulated nervous system. There's a gas pedal to our nervous system, and there's a brake pedal to our kiddos' nervous systems. And kiddos like Jake who are struggling with these challenges, they are all gas, no brakes. Even at rest, even when not having a tantrum or a meltdown or an outburst, think of it like the RPMs on their brain and their nervous system are revved up at 3, 4, 5,000 RPMs, and it only takes 6 or 7 to trigger the response. So even when they're not symptomatically expressing, they're brewing and bubbling underneath with that stress. That's what subluxation and nervous system dysregulation does. So the behavioral impact is that sensory overload, that emotional overload, doesn't take much. And if that sounds like your kiddo, then you've got to find out if that subluxation, that sympathetic dominance, and that nervous system imbalance or dysregulation is in there. There's an interconnectedness to this stress, sensory overload, overwhelm, overload, and these behavior issues, tantrums, and meltdowns. So to address the root cause, we got to find it. So in our office and all PX Docs nervous system focused chiropractic offices, we use a set of scans that can actually measure and show this stress on the inside. We run these scans at rest. So we can find even when a kiddo is calm, regulated, relaxed, often while we're doing the scans, we're getting to know them, having a joke. It's a very sensory, very safe, very easy 15 to 20 minute test that we can do that is not found anywhere else in healthcare because nobody's actually looking for the root cause. They're just trying to change the symptoms and change the environment on the outside. We go to the inside and find the root cause with this technology. We're going to link more information about these scans and about this approach. Click that link, send us a DM. Just like Jake, your child's nervous system may be overstressed and out of balance, and you got to look under the hood to find that. Do not live with this constant fear, constant stress. You want to talk about stress on the nervous system? When you know that any moment's notice, your kiddo could go off the rails and have another tantrum and another meltdown, it's a constant state of stress and anxiety for you. And either you go out and live life with that stress and with these tantrums or meltdowns, or what we unfortunately find with a lot of families is they withdraw and they shut down and they pull their kiddos out of school, or they don't go out in public and they don't go on vacations and they don't travel. And that is the heartbreaking part of this conversation that motivates us to say, we know what the root cause. We know what's really going on. It's a different approach in the best of ways from everything else out there. Doesn't mean behavioral modification and those things aren't awesome. It actually means when you, just like Jake's story, when you get the nervous system back in balance, those behavioral modifications, those transitions, those things you've taught your child or are trying to teach your child, they will actually get in, integrate, and work. And now your child can deploy all of those awesome things you're teaching them in this space and every space, whether it's behavior and emotions and school or karate and gold medals and national championships. Your child deserves to be out there living their best life. Your whole family deserves that without the constant fear of tantrums and meltdowns and behavior issues. So take a different approach. Look deeper with neurologically focused chiropractic. Follow the links, learn more, send us a DM, whatever you need. We're here to give you hope, answers, and drug-free help. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Do you have a question that you would like to submit? Either send it to support@pxdocs.com with the subject Ask Dr. Tony, or head on over to our socials @PXDocs, where you can submit your question in our stories every single week. Every kid counts and every family counts, so let's leave no questions left unanswered. If you loved this episode and you want to help us reach more kids, we would so appreciate if you left a review and a rating on your favorite platform. God bless, be well. We'll see you on the next one.